Mali has just delivered a huge blow to not only France, but the United Nations Security Council. This year, Mali's foreign minister reached the UN Security Council and revealed how France had financed and supported terrorism in the country. He also said Mali had asked for a UN probe into the situation, yet the UN stayed as a loyal lapdog of the West and did nothing. Stay tuned if you don't know what Mali said about France. Now, after years of Mali's accusation, the UN has still done nothing. At this, Mali's top court has initiated a terror probe into all the terrorist activities that happened in the country. This probe will trace down the roots of terrorism, which, in Mali's case, reached France and the West. So, what has the terror probe revealed that has changed literally everything for France, exposing its dirty face? Let's know about everything in this video. Imagine what would have happened if the US or France had apprehensions about any African country supporting terrorism. Well, within no time, that African country would have been invaded, leveled to the ground, and a civil war would have been initiated afterward. That's what happened with Libya when Muammar Gaddafi was ruling over it, and with Iraq when one of the most powerful leaders, Saddam Hussein, was standing against the West. There was no evidence against Saddam Hussein developing weapons of mass destruction. However, only the excuse was enough to invade the country, dethrone Saddam, and get him executed using Iraq's own court. You see the pattern? Whenever any country's leader stands against the West and becomes a threat to its dominance, he is replaced and sometimes assassinated. However, when it comes to the Western countries and them being accused of supporting and financing terrorism, nobody cares. Just imagine the level of double standards and hypocrisy. On the one hand, African and non-West countries are invaded just on suspicion of terrorism. On the other hand, when there is evidence against the Western country of supporting terrorism, nothing is done. The United Nations becomes a puppet, showing that it was never established for a more democratic international world, but for only the West. We see this again and again, and this has made the international community tired of trusting the United States and the principles it claims to protect. During the United Nations General Assembly session, Abdoulaye Diop, Mali's Minister for Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation, strongly condemned certain foreign powers for interfering in Mali's affairs. He asserted that this interference has fueled the criminal activities of terrorist groups in the region. However, he refrained from explicitly naming the specific foreign powers. It is widely understood who he was referring to. Minister Diop explicitly stated that Mali had previously raised concerns with the Security Council regarding France's actions on August 15th, council member. That's when everybody realized he was referring to France from the beginning. In essence, despite following proper channels and lodging complaints about France, the United Nations took no action. France was not held accountable, despite European countries being well aware of France's significant involvement in Africa. Expressing his disappointment, Minister Diop highlighted that despite tensions between communities by allegedly using human rights for political gains, this criticism prompted the government to request the mission's withdrawal in June 2023, with efforts underway to fulfill this request by December 31st, as per Security Council Resolution 2690. Reflecting on past events, Minister Diop criticized NATO's intervention in Libya in 2011, attributing it as the primary cause of the proliferation of terrorism across the Sahel. He urged the international community to learn from the mistakes made in Libya. You see, his tone conveyed a clear message. Mali is no longer ready to make requests or plead. Instead, it will inform the international community of its plans and carry them out. Mali has decided not to invest any more time at the United Nations, filing complaints against France, recognizing that no action will be taken. There's a possibility that the West is indifferent to the significant damage inflicted on the reputation of the United Nations. It's widely acknowledged globally that if any Western nation, like France, acts wrongly against a developing country, it will go unpunished. This lack of trust could prove costly for the UN, and this deteriorating process has already started. In the past, there was an illusion that the United Nations was genuinely an international body capable of ensuring compliance with international law. However, given France's actions in Africa over the years and the UN's unawareness of the situation, it has become apparent that no developing or weak country should expect much from the United Nations. Back in 2022, when France withdrew its Barkhane forces from Mali, tensions between Bamako and Paris remained high. Mali heightened its concerns to the United Nations, dispatching a letter to the UN Security Council via its foreign ministry, accusing France of supporting jihadists within Mali and violating its airspace. It's noteworthy that the letter used its straightforward language, accusing France of aiding jihadists, a blunt claim not commonly found in formal letters. The letter also claimed to possess several pieces of evidence demonstrating France's unauthorized entries into Malian airspace for the benefit of terrorist groups, including the dropping of weapons and ammunition. The revelation is quite astonishing. Mali has concrete proof that France was directly assisting terrorists. However, the United Nations took no action and ignored the matter. Do you see the hypocrisy here? When Western countries like France and the US just feel there must be weapons of mass destruction, they simply invade and destroy a country. However, when non-West countries have proper evidence against Western countries supporting terrorism, nothing is done. It becomes clear that only the powerful will rule in the international world, so the West always goes unpunished. Sometimes, the punishment is shifted to countries that did nothing. In the case of the Sahel African countries, they are blamed for their inability to fight terrorism. However, the truth is that terrorism in the Sahel finds its roots in the West. The letter detailed approximately 50 incidents of repetitive and frequent violations of Malian airspace by French forces since the beginning of 2022. It asserted that drones, helicopters, and fighter planes had flown over Mali without authorization from Bamako. What were those helicopters doing in the first place? Concerning accusations of espionage, Diop's letter accused the French of engaging in spying activities, including the dropping of packages by the French army on August 8. The Malian army asserted that covert overflights occurred after an attack on the Tessit camp, indicating an uncoordinated airspace breach. As per Diop, this evidence suggests that terrorist groups, particularly the Sahelian branch of the Islamic State group, received considerable external support and expertise. This support equipped them with sufficient weaponry to sustain the insurgency in Mali, potentially providing a pretext for France to maintain a presence in the country. It's essential to note that this wasn't the first time Mali accused France of violating its airspace. Similar allegations arose in April following the discovery of bodies in a mass grave in Gossi, which were returned to Malian forces. During that incident, Mali hinted toward French soldiers, while France countered by pointing fingers at Mali and Russian mercenaries from the Wagner Group. France vehemently denied any airspace violations, dismissing the accusations as disinformation. But everyone knew who really was behind that. In his letter, Diop urged an emergency meeting of the UN Security Council and warned about Mali's right to self-defense if such activities persist, potentially endangering the country's stability and security. In September 2022, Mali also voiced criticism against France on the same issue. Then Prime Minister Abdoulaye Maïga accused Paris of betraying Mali. The relationship between France and Mali's military government, which took control in 2020 and postponed elections until 2024, deteriorated rapidly, leading Mali to seek assistance from Russian mercenaries. Maïga challenged France to move beyond its colonial history, accusing the French government of adopting neo-colonial, condescending, paternalistic, and revanchist policies that, in his view, had stirred strong sentiments among Africans striving to uphold their dignity. Then Prime Minister Maïga asserted that French troops had established an enclave in northern Mali, subsequently handed over to the terrorist group Ansar al-Din. He alleged that France had been training these terrorist groups operating in Mali, claiming that the groups had originated from Libya. You should know that the conflict in Mali dates back to 2013 when France intervened after armed rebels seized control of the northern part of the country. Despite the presence of French troops in the region, violence expanded into central Mali and neighboring Burkina Faso and Niger, resulting in significant loss of life, displacement of people, and a lack of state presence in various parts of Mali. These claims weren't mere allegations, as no country would present a formal letter to the United Nations Security Council without substantial proof. Despite having substantial evidence implicating France in serious allegations of supporting terrorists, the United Nations failed to take any action. But let's calculate what might have happened if another country were in France's position. After switching the roles of France and Mali, we can conclude that if France had filed a complaint with the UN, presenting proof that Mali was sponsoring terrorists, it's likely that the UN would have authorized NATO and the UN security mission to intervene militarily against Mali. There is no doubt about this at all. However, since Mali isn't a Western nation and lacks a privileged ally within the United Nations, no decisive action has been taken against France. Here's a reminder to please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Black culture, history, civilization, and identity. Let's continue now. Given the UN's inaction against France, including a failure to conduct an investigation, Mali felt compelled to call for the expulsion of UN peacekeeping missions. Consequently, Mali's foreign minister urged the United Nations Security Council to promptly withdraw the peacekeeping mission from the country, citing its ineffectiveness in addressing security challenges. The fundamental reason behind this call was the United Nations' failure to scrutinize France's alleged sponsorship of terrorism in Mali. Foreign Minister Abdoulaye Diop emphasized, "The government of Mali demands the immediate withdrawal of MINUSMA," referring to the United Nations force in Mali. Since the UN is not more than a Western puppet, allowing the UN peacekeepers in Mali meant submitting to the Western order. Diop highlighted, "MINUSMA appears to have become part of the problem by exacerbating community tensions, fueled by extremely serious allegations that severely undermine peace, reconciliation, and national unity in Mali." In 2017, France, in collaboration with Burkina Faso, Niger, Mali, Mauritania, and Chad, launched the G5 Sahel Force, a counter-terrorism unit comprising 5,000 troops. Despite an extended mandate to operate across borders, these efforts ultimately lacked local support. A significant number of civilian casualties and accusations of human rights violations by security forces dealt a severe blow to regional and national initiatives. The failure to achieve intended objectives was attributed to a combination of structural deficiencies, tactical missteps, and, notably, a misinterpretation of the dynamics of local conflicts. But how is terrorism funded in West Africa? The Financial Action Task Force, FATF, shed light on this matter. The Intergovernmental Action Group Against Money Laundering in West Africa and the Financial Action Task Force collaborated on a research project aiming to uncover the various methods used by terrorists, terrorist groups, and their supporters in West Africa to raise, transfer, and utilize funds. The project team gathered data from experts stationed in 5 West African countries recognized for experiencing significant and frequent terrorism-related incidents: Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, Nigeria, and Senegal. The report outlined several ways terrorists secure funding, including financing through non-governmental organizations, charitable institutions, levies, and the illicit smuggling of arms, assets, and currencies using cash couriers. Furthermore, the report raises concerns about the potential involvement of France in financing terrorists, as many NGOs in Africa have roots in France. This underscores the need for accountability and scrutiny of NGOs to prevent indirect financing of terrorism. However, despite obtaining funding, acquiring weapons and ammunition poses challenges, given the absence of private weapon factories in African countries that could sell weapons to terrorists. That's when we see substantial evidence of Mali accusing France of supplying weapons to terrorists. You should know that the weapons used by terrorists are manufactured in Western countries, which makes it clear that France really was supplying terrorists with weapons. This sits well with Mali's accusation of French aircraft entering Mali's territory and delivering parcels containing weapons. Additionally, as emphasized by Mali's former prime minister, there is a possibility that French troops have established a base for terrorists, potentially leaving behind a significant arsenal. It turns out that the presence of French troops in African countries doesn't eliminate terrorism. Instead, there are accusations that they support and fulfill the demands of terrorists. It appears that the origins of terrorism in various countries might be traced back to France. Only a thorough investigation can unveil the truth, but the United Nations seems to be hindering such efforts. Despite Mali repeatedly bringing its claims to the attention of the United Nations, no tangible actions have been taken. What's more, little did Western countries have criticized Mali for accusing France, which implies that there is substantial evidence against France. The United Nations' silence on the matter appears to be a deliberate effort to prevent it from becoming public knowledge. Now, as Mali knew the UN would do nothing and would never initiate a terror probe, it launched a terrorism investigation targeting jihadists and ethnic separatists amidst a deteriorating security situation. The country's judiciary has officially announced an inquiry into numerous ethnic separatists and leaders affiliated with al-Qaeda, accusing them of terrorism and money laundering. Since Mali's court is investigating all terrorist activities, from their financing, support, and weapon provision to their roots, it becomes clear that the court will knock on France's doors at the end of the probe. Because there are no Western judges in the court, France has fewer chances to use its influence to get its name clear from the investigation. This has created shockwaves for France now. Since it has already been established in Mali that France is the main supporter, the whole investigation will focus on tracing French actions from the start. Malian authorities will look at acts of terrorism linked to France, involving examining individuals, groups, or activities suspected of being connected to terrorism, including tasks such as collecting evidence, conducting interviews, and analyzing relevant information. Mali's court would have authority over the investigation, operating within Mali's legal framework. After the investigation, the report will also be sent to the UN, making it essential for the UN to take action against France. It's because the report will be like a court's verdict where all the evidence will indicate France. Given the global nature of counterterrorism efforts, such an investigation could involve collaboration with relevant international organizations or the cooperation of other countries, particularly if there are implications that cross borders. At present, the individuals under scrutiny include Iyad Ag-Ghali, a Tuareg militant and leader of the al-Qaeda-linked coalition support group for Islam and Muslims, GSIM, along with the radical Fulani preacher Amadou Kufa, associated with the same group. The Bamako Court of Appeal public prosecutor issued instructions for the investigation. Additionally, the investigation targets 6 Tuareg leaders from an alliance of armed groups that recently reignited a rebellion against the state despite having signed a peace deal in Algiers in 2015. The public prosecutor clarified that the investigation is directed not only against the terrorist leaders, but also other members who were signatories to the 2015 peace agreement and have subsequently transitioned into terrorism. The charges specified include extremely serious acts that are likely to constitute the alleged offenses of criminal conspiracy, acts of terrorism, money laundering and financing of terrorism, illegal possession of weapons of war and munitions, and complicity in these same acts. Since 2012, Mali has been contending with an Islamist insurgency that originated in the northern region of the vast West African state, resulting in the loss of thousands of military and civilian lives. The violence has extended across the country and spilled into neighboring Burkina Faso and Niger, intensifying ethnic tensions. Following a coup 3 years ago, Mali's junta ended ties with its former colonial power, France, opting for closer relations with Moscow. The junta has also mandated the departure of the UN's multi-dimensional integrated stabilization mission in Mali, MINUSMA, which has maintained a presence of around 15,000 soldiers and police in the country for the past decade. Now, there is little chance that France would be offered any flexibility since we are talking about the investigation being carried out by the Malian court, not the United Nations. But guess what? When France does something against any other powerful state, it is held accountable. In the spotlight, the new anti-capitalist party, NPA, in France is currently under investigation for allegedly glorifying terror in the aftermath of the Hamas attacks. French Interior Minister Gerald Darmanin disclosed on a TV news show that prosecutors had passed the case to the police. This move comes in light of the NPA's expressed support for the Palestinians and their chosen means of resistance, notably employing the term intifada to signify an uprising. The NPA accused Israel of employing a strategy termed the lawnmower, marked by the systematic elimination of activists and opponents of the occupation in an ongoing cycle. They claimed that this time, the offensive was on the side of the resistance. In the midst of these developments, Prime Minister Elizabeth Borne stressed France's zero tolerance for any anti-Semitic acts or comments within the country. Expressing solidarity with the Jewish community, Borne declared that attacking them was equivalent to attacking the entire republic. She denounced the surge in anti-Semitic acts following the Hamas attack, citing numerous incidents, including threats, arrests, and even drones with cameras entering schoolyards. At the same time, France conveyed its opposition to suspending aid directly benefiting the Palestinian population, responding to the EU's review of development assistance in the wake of the conflict. Last year, France contributed €95 million in aid, focusing on water, health, food security, and education. Following a meeting with Jewish community representatives and security services, Interior Minister Darmanin issued a warning of potential dissolution proceedings against organizations glorifying terrorism. Responding to a question about another leftist political party, France Unbowed, Darmanin suggested it hadn't shown the opposite of being anti-Semitic. What's more, the UN never initiated a probe against France, but it is more than ready to do it when it comes to initiating a probe against Mali. A human rights expert from the United Nations called for a thorough and independent investigation into alleged mass crimes in central Mali. Note the word alleged, which means there is no proof. But despite this, whenever any Western leader talks about any African country, they talk in such a way that shows they have evidence against human rights violations. What do you think? Will Malice Terror Probe find sufficient evidence of French involvement in terrorism? Isn't it true that terrorism in the Sahel region benefited France and the West because, in that way, they could send their troops and safeguard their interests? Let us know your thoughts in the comment section right below on what if the probe finds out France has a hand in all terrorist activities in Mali. Will the UN punish France? Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If yes, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We have decided to bring videos on something nobody talks about: the Black culture, civilization, history, and evidence about how glorious Blacks have been. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.